In this video, we'll print and test a fin that floats for around 13 Australian dollars. The 3D printed fins filled with epoxy work well, but almost too well for prototyping. To try and reduce costs further and test concepts for 3D printing larger, lighter objects, I purchased some two-part expanding polyurethane foam that claims to expand 20 to 25 times its size. First, I tried filling a reject print of 15% gyroid infill with 1/20th the volume of the expanding epoxy, which was about 14 milliliters. If the foam expanded its claim 20 times, then it should fill the volume of the fin sufficiently. However, it didn't expand close to 20 times, more like 10 to 15 times. So I printed some test samples with various infills from 2% to 15% and attempted to fill the void space via just 2 holes. It seemed fairly easy to do this up to 10% infill, but at 15% infill required multiple holes to fill all the pore space. None of the samples I could break by hand despite their small size. There is also significant weight difference, showing the epoxy has trouble squeezing through all the void space in the higher infill prints. Then I load tested the samples with a simple jig. The 20 kilogram salt load test seemed excessive, so I used a spray bottle filled with about 8.5 litres of water, so the total load is approximately 9 kilograms. The samples deflected and I had to put a clamp to stop the container slipping off. The 15, 10 and 5% infill samples all held. The 4% sample, however, just started to fail when I'd almost released the water bottle. Interestingly, the infill just started collapsing instead of it snapping as I expected. Based on this, I printed a 10% infill fin. In my haste, I didn't put any anti-warp features on the print like support discs, and the fin warped. I decided to test fill it with expanding foam but without any carbon stiffeners or threaded rod. To be safe, I went with the ×10 expansion ratio, or about 27 milliliters, then an additional 10 milliliters for wastage. With the density of epoxy approximately 1.2, the mass required would be about 50 grams. To try and maximize the chance of the epoxy getting to the tip, I cooled the epoxy in the fridge for a few hours and also the 3D print in the freezer before filling to slow the expansion. I injected the majority of the epoxy through the leading edge hole and a smaller amount through the trailing edge hole. The fin filled completely all the way to the tip. It also pushed through the pore space in the print and filled some of the carbon rod holes and the tuttle holes. Based on this win, another fin was printed and loaded with carbon stiffener rods and the tuttle bolts. I injected the same amount of epoxy, however this time I put approximately the same amount through the leading and trailing edge fill holes. This was a mistake, as the epoxy loaded through the trailing edge did not expand that much. Consequently, the foam did not quite expand all the way to the tip. I tried drilling a small hole and injecting some more foam with a needle, but it was super hard to extrude. Useless. In the end, I just drilled a 4mm hole and injected it with some epoxy left over from another fin I was filling at the same time. I load tested the fin using the usual 20 kilogram bag of salt. Initially it held, but by the time I got my phone out to take a picture, there was a large crack. The fin did not break in half, but there was a large diagonal crack across the whole fin. Almost as a joke, I went for a spin with this fin. I was fully expecting the fin to fail, but since it floated, I could easily recover it. It was a very light wind day. However, the fin did not break despite my best efforts. The following day had much more wind, and this time I strapped the fin cam on as I was sure it would break and would provide some light, entertaining footage. Again, despite my best efforts, the fin didn't break. Even more surprising was it also handled the rougher, choppier conditions and pointed upwind well. Since I couldn't break the fin on the water, I tried a new load test with the various samples by standing on them. I weigh 75 kilograms and all the samples from 15% to 4% infill held under my full weight. The 3% infill sample collapsed and only the 2% one snapped. Based on this, it appears you can further reduce cost of fins by eliminating the carbon rods altogether, which will bring the cost to around $8 per fin. This bodes well for another project, which is 3D printing a new windsurf board. Stand by for updates. Thank you.